Here is a question rarely asked at seminary or from the pulpit. Not what does a biblical text mean, but what kind of truth does a given interpretation actually produce? This diagram illustrates the 4 conventional modes of interpretation trained into every pastor. You read a text to produce a devotional thought, a doctrinal conclusion, a moral framework, or a typological pattern. The structural vulnerability of these 4 frameworks is that they are entirely internally generated. They require the pre-existing faith of the reader to function. The tradition validates the interpretation, and the interpretation validates the tradition. An interpretation built strictly on these 4 pillars is epistemologically indistinguishable from an unrevealed religion. A community can construct moral teachings, theological systems, and devotional practices around any deity it chooses to imagine. Treating these derivative frameworks as the absolute foundation leaves a religion running on fumes. It creates a system that lacks any mechanism to verify its own transcendence. Any meaning derived from a religious text that requires the reader's faith to sustain it cannot stand on its own. It is merely a human community constructing ideas about God from within its own imagination. Contrast this closed loop with meaning that is autonomously transcendent, meaning that does not need your emotional state, theological arguments, or traditional authority to exist. To possess transcendent truth in a verifiable sense, a self-disclosing God must place specific announcements on the historical record, in physical, datable documents, before the events they describe occur. In this framework, the Word is not the Bible in a general, spiritual sense. It is the specific, supernaturally generated, Messianic oracular stream of the Hebrew prophets. That prophetic stream is not mere background context to Jesus of Nazareth. It is his informational self present in the world today, remaining accessible long after his physical body departed. To preach the actual, historical Jesus, every interpretation must be tested against this checkable prior declaration. Substituting the oracular record with abstract theological concepts removes the evidence. We can test these conventional readings against the Messianic reading, using standard seminary texts to see exactly how the data disappears. This split-screen analysis shows the devotional approach to Daniel 9. Standard historical commentary focuses almost entirely on Daniel's posture. It extracts lessons on his earnestness, his humility, and how his petition should encourage our own prayers. The commentator then notes, almost as an afterthought, that the angel Gabriel's response seems to have no bearing on the subject of the prayer and moves on. The Messianic reading evaluates the actual response, a highly specific chronological announcement naming the arrival and violent death of the Anointed One in exact, datable terms. The devotional reading requires your emotional state to validate its lesson. The Messianic reading rests on an event confirmed in human history, independent of how anyone feels about it. Reducing this text to devotional encouragement dissolves the concrete data required to prove the message originated from outside the human timeline. This flowchart illustrates the doctrinal approach to Isaiah 53. Classic commentators organize the chapter entirely around the abstract mechanisms of vicarious atonement, sorting the text into theological categories like divine justice and subsequent glory. This method treats the specific, datable details of an ancient document as mere confirmation of a theology. It categorizes the ideas but misses the phenomenon. The Messianic reading approaches Isaiah 53 as a checkable report placed on the record 7 centuries in advance. The text explicitly demands belief in the oracular disclosure itself, not just assent to a concept. The early church understood this precise epistemological grounding, which is exactly how Paul frames his argument at the beginning of the book of Romans. Paul does not present Christ's sonship as a freestanding theological assertion. He grounds it strictly in the phrase, promised beforehand through his prophets. Doctrines like atonement and sonship are valid conclusions, but a conceptual conclusion cannot serve as the verifiable phenomenon that proves the religion is true. Typology is the most effective substitute for the Messianic hermeneutic because they look nearly identical, but typology relies on internal pattern recognition, not predictive verification. Consider Micah 5:2. Commentators reliably abstract this geographic claim into a theological symbol, noting that Bethlehem means house of bread, perfectly fitting the Messiah. That is a literary device. The Messianic reality is that Micah 5:2 is a checkable claim, naming a specific physical village too small to register among the clans of Judah, written 7 centuries before the birth occurred. Or take Zechariah 11, which names 30 pieces of silver, thrown to the potter, in the house of the Lord. Scholars expend endless energy on source-critical puzzles regarding who quoted whom, ignoring the sheer statistical impossibility of the text's precise correspondence to the specific actions of Judas. Moral frameworks and literary patterns can be organically generated by any sufficiently wise culture. Only a prior declaration matching a specific historical event proves intervention from outside the human timeline. These case studies reveal a severe structural asymmetry. Conventional readings cannot produce autonomously transcendent meaning, but the Messianic hermeneutic necessarily generates all 4 conventional modes as byproducts. When we rebuild the architecture, we start with a bedrock foundation of the prior historical declaration. This ground produces legitimate doctrine because the certified identity of the Messiah generates real theological conclusions. It produces moral authority because the commands of a certified Messiah carry the objective weight of that certification. It produces genuine typology because the strict correspondence between the declared and the fulfilled is structurally typological. The entire system locks into place. A Christianity built strictly on those 4 pillars, without the phenomenal ground beneath them, is simply a sophisticated community relating to a deity it constructed from its own traditions. The Messianic hermeneutic does not invent a new religion. It restores the actual ground, so your existing doctrines have something objective to stand on. This reconstructed epistemological model is exactly the standard Paul applies in 1 Corinthians 15, when he warns that faith without the resurrection is futile. Paul writes according to the scriptures twice, once for the death and once for the resurrection. He is installing the load-bearing tie-downs for the entire faith. Without that specific phrase linking those historical events to the prior oracle stream, the resurrection is stripped of its proof. It becomes indistinguishable from the unverified founding myth of any other religion. If your faith feels like it is running on fumes, you are fed ideas about Jesus instead of the verified word that announced him. To preach the actual Jesus, you must start with the specific, historically confirmed oracle word. The word was placed on the record before the events occurred. It is available for examination right now. It remains the only verifiable difference between a revealed religion and a human invention. Start there.